Welcome everybody. On behalf of the board of the Victorian Cleantech Cluster, I'm very pleased that you're able to join us at our inaugural Victorian Cleantech Expo and Conference. I am Nigel Murphy, the chair of the Victorian Cleantech Cluster. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which we are occupied on. We're all in different parts of Australia and also overseas, so I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. I'm on Wurundjeri land in Melbourne, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. We owe much to the knowledge of and respect for sustainability that our traditional custodians embody. We recognise that this legacy continues, and it is important in helping to shape our clean tech sector. We've got an action-packed event over the next 3 days. I'm very excited to participate, and I'm sure if you're not already a clean tech enthusiast, you are going to be one by the end of this event. We have great speakers and some great companies and organisations exhibiting their clean technologies and offerings. So please connect with your fellow clean techers, build your network, learn from others that are forging paths, and contribute to and help our emerging entities. Clean tech is necessarily broad. It brings together a diverse community, all embracing products, services and processes that greatly reduce or eliminate negative ecological impacts, improve productive and responsible use of natural resources, and also provide superior performance at lower costs. It is the way of the future, and we need to embrace it. The Victorian Cleantech Cluster is the driving force behind the Expo. The cluster is a not-for-profit organisation whose aim is to help drive the clean tech sector by importantly bringing together industry, research, government and capital. It's only through collaboration that we can really drive the change and overcome the obstacles needed for a more sustainable future. If you're not already a member of the cluster, you're welcome to join and contribute to the growth and development of this important area to our society and economy. I'd like also to acknowledge our supporters and sponsors, who are many, and in particular, I'd like to thank the Victoria, who have been a long-term supporter of the clean tech vision and also the Victorian Cleantech Cluster. Global Victoria, who is the Government of Victoria's premier trade facilitation agency, has been our partner in this event, and we really appreciate their foresight and commitment to making this Expo a reality. So I think you've heard from me for now. You'll probably hear a little bit more later on in proceedings. So I'd like to hand over to our host of our opening session, Eytan Lenko. Eytan is the chair of Beyond Zero Emissions. He is also a technology entrepreneur, an active investor and mentor in clean tech. So he's one of our leading lights in this area, and I'd like to hand over to Eytan to open the first session. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel, for the kind introduction, and congrats on putting together a really impressive Expo. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the incredible speakers that we have at this session, but also the next few days. As Nigel said, I'm the chair of Beyond Zero Emissions, or BZE, and BZE is a Victorian-based organisation that's at the forefront of showing how Australia can prosper through the move to a zero emissions economy. BZE brings together engineers, business, government, and the community to create a detailed and compelling vision of how a region or a sector can decarbonise, and we work with them to make it happen. You might have heard of our Million Jobs Plan last year, which showed that through accelerating decarbonisation, Australia can create 1.8 million jobs over the next 5 years. Our CEO, Heidi Lee, is going to be speaking later this afternoon, and that's going to be a really great session. So today I'm going to be chairing this morning's session, which is going to feature Saul Griffith and Minister Lily D'Ambrosio. The way the session is going to work is that each speaker will give their presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A panel afterwards where we'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So if you have questions as we go, just pop them into the chat. There's a Q&A section in the chat. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Saul Griffith. And, you know, by background, I'd say that linking decarbonisation to prosperity has gone from really a fringe idea 10 years ago to something that's becoming very much mainstream. So that's testament to all of the amazing people that you're going to hear from over the course of the Victorian Cleantech Expo. But in the US in particular, we're seeing a dramatic shift as the Biden administration completely embraces the concept of climate action being a driver for jobs and the economy. And a big part of the credit for that shift is due to the work of our next speaker, Saul Griffith. Saul is the founder and chief scientist at OtherLab, an independent R&D lab that helps government agencies and Fortune 500 companies understand energy infrastructure and build transformational technologies that bring them closer to 100% decarbonisation. Saul's innovations are across the fields of industrial design, technology, and science education. His ideas haven't always been focused on green energy. Back in 2007, when he was awarded a MacArthur Genius Grant, he already had patents in optics, textiles, and nanotechnology. More recently, Saul co-founded the organization Rewiring America, which seeks to create millions of American jobs while fighting the climate crisis. Saul's an advisor to the Biden administration, and I'm really looking forward to hearing his insights this morning. And best of all, Saul's Australian, and he's recently moved back to Australia from the States with his family, and we're lucky to have him. So let's have a warm welcome for Saul Griffith.
Hello, here I am. Thank you, Eytan, for the generous introduction. Hopefully someone can indicate that I'm not just talking to myself. And once I know that, I'll launch. As Eytan said, I'm an Australian, originally grew up in Sydney, now living in Wollongong, having returned from America last year to escape their COVID problem. Have started about a half a dozen clean tech energy companies now in industrial solar, industrial wind, rooftop solar, air conditioning and heating systems. Those are my day jobs. My night job, or my hobby, has been energy data, and my night job has been starting an organization, Rewiring America. I'm going to talk to you about that today. And I'm going to give you we're trying to demystify what decarbonisation means at retail. That means at street level. And that is a conversation that's now down to enumerating the machines in the economy that we have to replace in America. And so I'm going to go through that presentation. I'm going to share that screen now. Here we go. All right, Rewiring America. So we've delayed climate action globally enough. Got to wait for my spinning wheels to stop spinning. Oh. Okay, I'm having a technical problem here. Oh. Let's hope that it pops back up in a second. That's what I did last time. This talk is actually going to be about electrification and the computerization of it. And if that's true, I was about to say we're in trouble and we're not going to solve climate change, but apparently. So we've delayed climate action enough. The situation we now have is in the next decade, we have to cut emissions 50%, and we've got to continue to cut by 50% through the rest of the century to have any chance of staying under 2 degrees. That's a little bit of an optimistic assessment because due to bad politics, countries like Australia and America argued with the IPCC to include negative emissions in the forecast. If you have a less optimistic view of that, we need to move even faster. That means you've really got to reform your energy system as fast as you can. I think we're going to have permanent slide problems, Anna. Or it's going to be a delay like that for every slide. So this is, what do we know? The first time we really had an energy crisis was in the 70s. That was an oil crisis. The US did not have a Department of Energy at that time, and they commissioned a study to find out what the energy situation was. And this was the first result of that. This is called the Sankey flow diagram of energy. This is still how we understand energy today in the world. And it was at that time invented to solve the supply side oil crisis for the lack of oil that was coming from the Middle East, which was about 15% of America's supply. This is the abstractions or that we invented to solve that problem. We started talking about the residential sector, the commercial sector, the industry sector. Those names, if you're in the industry, we still use those today. And in fact, if you remember the black and white slide I just showed, now when the slide finally ticks over, you'll see perhaps you could make the only thing that has changed in the American energy industry, and in fact globally since the 70s, is we added color to the graphs. And in fact, the sectors are still the same and the proportions and flows are still the same, except now that we have a new energy crisis, which is decarbonization, and we're still trying to use this to figure it out. And if we go to the next slide, I'll actually show you the Australian energy flow diagrams, which are enormously dominated by our exports. We export 600% of the energy we use domestically, and that's why the export conversation has dominated Australia's climate conversation. And then today, I'm hoping to bring it down to table level. I apologize to everyone for the, there's about a 30-second delay on hitting next slide. Here we go. This is the Australian energy sector. You can see in the top right there, that giant gray bar is our export economy, which dwarfs everything else. That's to say, I'm going to talk about the American economy today. I'm in the middle of a project to do this analysis for the Australian economy. Energy is complicated for experts, let alone citizens, as given by that diagram and those big abstract sectors. The way citizens actually think about energy is in terms of their household economics and their kitchen table. There's a cute coloring and drawing from my daughter about how she feels about climate change. Yeah, here we go. We think about our households. Our households have 2 cars in the garage. We have to heat them. We have to cool them. We have to cook. We have to have big screen televisions, etc. And in fact, our households are connected to all of the sectors in different ways. The transport, more than half of our transportation fuels are in our garage. Commercial and industry in separate, we process all of our fuels in industry, so those are energy flows that we realize in the household. In fact, in America, 42% of all emissions are linked to decisions about fuels you use in your home. In Australia, it's about 50%. That's because we proportionally drive more. And if you added small businesses, about 60 to 65% of all emissions are related to things connected to our homes and our offices. And so we really need to decarbonize, electrify all of those things. And this is the study that we did with the Department of Energy that gives us all of this data. This is as much as you can know about all of the energy flows in the US economy. These slides were meant to be walked through really quickly, so I'm a little concerned about timing. All right. Okay. So I'm not going to stress about this. We're just going to go into overtime, and we'll let this play out. So we're going to have a quick look at what it would mean to completely decarbonize America, at least all of those emissions connected to homes and businesses, and then we lose. Oh. I'm going to stop sharing and just do the narrative version of this talk. How about that? So here's what we know. So people actually make decisions about energy in their household. So we buy gasoline or petrol, we buy electricity, we buy natural gas to heat the homes. In the US, between 5% and 12% of household income, depending upon where your household sits economically, is consumed on energy spending. In fact, in the US, the average family spends more on electricity than they do on education in a given year. They spend more on gasoline than they spend on fresh fruit, food, and vegetables. And the average American household spends about $4,500 a year on all of its energy costs. In Australia, that's about $6,500 a year. And the giant opportunity that we have in solving climate change is actually improving those household economics. You can divide every number that I say by 10 and it will give you the Australian picture. But what we need to do in the US, there's 130 million households. We need to put solar on 80% of their roofs. We need to replace the 250 million internal combustion engine vehicles with electric vehicles. We need to replace the 70 million natural gas furnaces with electric heat pump furnaces. We need to replace 10 million fuel oil boilers. We need to replace 65 million natural gas water heaters. We need to replace 43 million natural gas stovetops, 10 million natural gas ovens. There's 71 million natural gas barbecues in the US that need replacing. To enable all of those things to be electrified, we will need to, if you run the study in the US, double the we need to more than double the amount of electricity delivered to every household. So in gross figures, and this truth is also for Australia, if you electrify the average 2 vehicles that are in every driveway, that will a little more than double the electric load of that house. If you also electrify all of the heating systems, that's the hot water, the heating and the cooking, you'll add another amount of electricity again. So you roughly 2.1 to 3 times the amount of electricity needs to be delivered to every household. And we need to figure out how to do all of that in the next 20 years. And in the US, that the infrastructure that will enable that means we need to upgrade the circuit breaker in every home. We'll also need to add vehicle chargers to every garage, and all those. So those will add another few hundred million machines. So in America, there's 1 billion machines that need to be installed in our homes and driveways to get to decarbonization. In Australia, that's around 100 million machines. That's, for the entrepreneurs in the audience, an incredible opportunity. So if you can be the person who merely figures out how to electrify all of the cooking in a way that is a better cooking experience than people currently have today, and you can match those cooking loads to solar loads. So the unfortunate thing about cooking is everyone wants to cook a couple of hours after the sun goes down. So cooking is a prime use case for why we need to solve the storage problems. We also like to air condition our homes a few hours after the solar peak of the day. We like to heat our homes My video is cutting out. I'm not even sure if I'm being heard anymore. Okay, sorry. I apologize to everyone. So maybe to wrap it up, and this will work better in the in conversation with Eytan, but we can now do a study, or we can now say the following thing convincingly in the US, which I think has the opportunity to completely change climate politics in the US, and in some respects, the inspiration is Australia. Famously, Australia has got rooftop solar to about $1 a watt installed. That's about 5 or 6 cents per kilowatt hour levelized cost of electricity. In the US, it's still $3 a watt installed for solar, which unfortunately is about 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So in the US, rooftop solar is still more expensive than the grid. However, the US has got really good electric vehicle policies. And so you can now, for 2 cents a mile, drive an electric vehicle, whereas the cost of ownership for a gasoline-powered car or a petrol car in America is about 15 cents a mile. And then we have countries like South Korea and Germany that are leading the heat pump and revolution for heating. And you might say the future is when we can have all of those three policies in one place. And if you take the economics of those South Korean heat pumps, the economics of California electric vehicles, and the economics of Australian rooftop solar, if you could make a country where that existed, and we invented that country and did the study for the US, you could save the average American household $1,000 to $2,500 per year by 2025, which I think is an incredible opportunity for businesses, an incredible political opportunity, because we now have a story to tell about how we completely decarbonize faster than people expected, and we start saving money in people's homes. And if you do the studies in Australia, the savings are even more significant because we pay more for petrol and we pay more for natural gas than Americans, and we have cheaper solar. So in Australia, the study that I've been doing, it isn't quite finished, looks like we should be able to get $2,000 to $4,000 annual savings for people in the suburbs when we completely decarbonize their life, provided that we can create the right set of incentives and policies to make this happen. I'm personally incredibly excited by that, and it emphasizes where the technologies we need are. It's in gluing all of that together with the software and the control layers and the battery layers and the local distribution network, and that's where I hope a huge number of the entrepreneurs in Australia are focused. Because Australia has such cheap rooftop solar, we could be the first country in the world to achieve this vision of saving the middle class money while decarbonizing. And by doing so, we would have huge export potentials because we can show the rest of the world how to do it. It will take longer in the US and even longer in Europe for both political and climate reasons. And so I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity for Australia to lead the world in showing us how to live the lives we want while decarbonizing on schedule for a climate that our children need. And with that, I'll let the minister speak and we'll come back in question time. Sorry about the presentation.
Thanks, Saul. There's definitely no irony in that we're talking about these concepts that are going to lead us to a future that's electrified and technological, and yet we're still having issues with screen sharing. So that was great. I mean, some of the key points that I took away from Saul's talk is that we've got an incredible opportunity to solve climate change while improving household economics, mainly through electrification. But that's going to mean that we need to replace 100 million machines over the next 20 years. And machines can be things like stove, hot water heaters, those sorts of things, which is an incredible opportunity for entrepreneurs. Saul talked about the 3 platforms that we need to do that. So cheap solar, electric vehicles, and heat pumps. And Australia already has the cheapest solar in the world. So that's a great starting point. And we just need to up our game on electric vehicles and heat pumps. So that's a challenge and opportunity for everyone here today, but especially governments who are often judged by the impact that they have on household economics. So that's a really good segue to introduce our next speaker, the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio. Minister D'Ambrosio has represented the electorate of Mill Park since 2002 and is currently the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change and the Minister for Solar Homes. Minister D'Ambrosio is a leader in action on climate change, renewable energy and energy efficiency in Australia. She oversaw the passage of the Climate Change Act, which is Victoria's landmark climate legislation, which saw it become Australia's first state to legislate in line with the Paris Agreement on net zero emissions by 2050. I'm personally always impressed with Minister D'Ambrosio's grasp of her portfolio and leadership in this fast-moving and often contentious sector, so I'm really looking forward to hearing her speak today. Let's welcome Minister D'Ambrosio.
Hello, how are you? Eytan, thank you very much for your welcome and good morning to everybody here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I am located and all of us here across the state. And my respects go to all elders, past, present, emerging, and any who are amongst us here today. And I'd like to also acknowledge Saul, Griffith, Rupert Posner, and of course Eytan, Lenko, who gave my introduction. Certainly Victoria is home to a thriving and diverse cleantech community, and our government is absolutely committed to taking action that supports this important and growing sector. We're doing that through a number of key drivers, very strong, ambitious policies, our clean energy policies that have led the country and kept the flag flying, if you like, in terms of decarbonising our energy system, creating a circular economy and our ongoing response to climate change. We're also transforming Victoria to meet the challenges of the future, while at the same time seizing the opportunities to grow our economy sustainably. Victoria's renewable energy strength leads the country, and in the 4 years before we came to government in 2014, output from renewable energy had stagnated at around about 10% of total output. So from about 2011, we saw that there was very little shift on the dial in terms of the growth in renewable energy in Victoria. By the end of last year, through our very ambitious renewable energy program and commitments, that share went from 10% to more than 26%, more than comfortably meeting our 2020 renewable energy target of 25%. And in the first 3 months of this year, we've hit nearly 30% of our power supply coming from renewable energy generated here in Victoria. And certainly we are well on the way to achieving our target of 50% of our power needs coming from renewable sources by 2030. So our shift to clean energy is vital if we are to meet our target of net zero emissions by 2050. It is often referred to as the low-hanging fruit that is transforming or decarbonising our energy system, but that's not to say, of course, that it doesn't have its challenges when it comes to local impacts. But certainly it is absolutely vital, and it underpins the commitment, our legislated commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 in Victoria. Our government announced a record $1.6 billion to clean energy package in the 2020-21 state budget, which was announced in November last year. That's the biggest ever investment in clean energy by any state government in Australia. We've launched the Renewable Energy Zone Development Plan that was part of that investment, $540 million for that fund. Our state is delivering the single largest investment for our renewable energy zones, more than the states of New South Wales and Queensland combined in terms of state government investment. That is absolutely significant. Under the $108 million Energy Innovation Initiative, so it's another initiative, we've set up the Energy Innovation Fund, which is designed to fast-track technologies to drive the transition beyond 2025. That is our decarbonising of the energy system. We've also designed a renewable hydrogen industry development plan. And we've struck an agreement with Energy Australia on the early closure of the Yallourn Power Station by 2028. Make no mistake in terms of what the impact of that will be on reducing emissions. And absolutely importantly too is the fact that it gives time for the workforce and the Latrobe Valley communities to transition to new opportunities. It will also allow the construction of a new 350 megawatt 4-hour duration battery to be in place by 2026. So with the already announced 300 megawatt Victorian big battery near Geelong, which will come online later this year, that is the largest battery to be built in the Southern Hemisphere, plus our 3 existing batteries that are already being built, large batteries that is. Victoria is leading, well, in fact, we're leading the country in terms of the deployment of large battery technologies, grid-scale battery storage. And we are about to launch our second Victorian Renewable Energy Target Auction, which will add at least 600 megawatts of new capacity to the already 900 plus megawatts that we are seeing being built that came about from our first auction that was held in 2017. We expect through this ambitious agenda driven by real investment and real policy design, we expect more than 5,000 megawatts of renewable energy to come online by the time that Yallourn retires by 2028. Our solar homes program passed 100,000 solar PV systems installed since it was launched in 2018, with 700,000 units installed in the past decade. In the 2021 state budget, we also invested an unprecedented $515 million in Victoria's waste and recycling sector to drive the state towards a circular economy. This includes delivery of our once-in-a-generation plan, Recycling Victoria, a new economy, a new circular economy. This plan will cut waste, it'll boost jobs and deliver a recycling system Victorians can rely on and be proud of. By 2030, every Victorian council will be required to provide, and they will provide, a standardised 4-bin household waste and recycling service with separated glass and organics. By 2023, we will introduce a container deposit scheme, and we are banning problematic single-use plastics, which I announced a couple of months ago. We'll support new end markets for recycled materials, industry innovation and infrastructure investment. We've set ambitious targets for the next 10 years to drive our recycling transition. For example, we aim to cut waste generation by 15%, divert 80% of waste from landfill, and halve the amount of organic material going to landfill. By 2040, Recycling Victoria will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by up to 19.4 million tonnes. It will change how we perceive what we currently call waste, turning it into a valuable resource that can be used, reused and reused again. New local industries will develop with world-class infrastructure and technology built here in Victoria. It has the potential to boost our economy by up to $6.7 billion and support the creation of more than 3,900 new local jobs. A circular economy requires better business models focused on design, on maintenance, on repair and disposal, and not just product sales and supply. We're moving from a linear economy where we take, use and throw away resources into one that revitalises existing businesses and creates innovative new ones to deliver jobs, growth and investment. This change is happening in Victoria right now, and the Victorian government is leading that direction. We're using our purchasing power to boost end markets for recycled materials. We're optimising the use of recycled and reused materials on transport projects, for example, through our Recycled First policy. Victoria's Big Build is delivering more than 100 major road and rail projects across the state and is using recycled materials. Just some examples of that. 190 million glass bottles will be used on the $1.8 billion Western Roads upgrade. In a world first, noise walls along the Mordialloc Freeway will be made from 75% recycled plastic. We're also supporting business to play a key role. Victoria's new Circular Economy Business Innovation Centre, or CBIC, will help Victorian businesses take advantage of the opportunities the transition will bring. CBIC, which I launched in November last year, is bringing together industry, academic and government expertise to deliver new partnerships, grants programs and research to drive on-the-ground results. Already, Victorian businesses are harnessing the opportunities a circular economy provides. And just some examples of those successful businesses. Reimaginarium is successfully turning vintage radios into retro Bluetooth speakers. TechBuyer revamps IT data centre equipment that would otherwise go to landfill, saving virgin materials like rare earth metals. These are just a couple examples. Sustainability Victoria's CEO, Claire Ferris-Miles, will have more to say about our circular economy strategy when she addresses the Expo tomorrow, I believe. Our plans for a circular economy and a clean energy future are vital in tackling climate change head-on, while ensuring Victoria's ongoing prosperity. These things are not mutually exclusive. They will help us reach our legislative goal of net zero emissions by 2050. I'm excited about the pending release of our inaugural climate change strategy, which is very, very imminent. This strategy will set economy-wide emissions reduction targets for 2025 and 2030. My aim is to be ambitious and achieve what we set about achieving. It will outline how we will cut emissions while boosting our economy and the health and well-being of all Victorians. We are also developing an integrated approach to how we can adapt to a changing climate. Statewide adaptation action plans are being developed for 7 key systems: the built environment, education and training, health and human services, the natural environment, primary production, transport and water cycle. This will complement our climate change work with local councils. We're also developing regional adaptation strategies to build on the great work of local and regional communities and organisations. We recognise how important that great work is. That's why we developed the $1 million Community Climate Change Adaptation Grants Program to fund 17 projects across Victoria. All this collective and collaborative action is making Victoria an immensely attractive place to live, to work and to invest. We see clean energy and the circular economy as an incubator that will allow clean tech businesses to establish and flourish, knowing that they have a government that backs them and what they are wanting to achieve. A cleaner, greener and more environmentally sustainable Victoria will make our economy more robust. It will drive new technologies, new jobs and new investment. I see clean tech industries like those represented here today as a vital part of that future. And events like this Expo are key to supporting our transition to a more sustainable way of living. So I look forward to the rest of the deliberations over the coming days, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Fantastic to hear about Victoria's ambitions. It's good to, great to get that update that Victoria is now at around 30% renewables. And yeah, we all heard about some of the great initiatives that Victoria's pushing forward on, particularly in waste and the circular economy. And I'm sure we're all, I won't ask you questions about exactly what the economy-wide emissions targets are going to be, because I'm sure you're not going to tell us today, but I'm looking forward to that imminent announcement. So we're going to go into a Q&A session. We've got some questions. Saul, are you, I'll let you join. Here we go. Which is good, because the first question is actually for you, Saul. We've got a question from the audience. How would you rate the level of climate change awareness and personal responsibility for action in Australia relative to the US? And a part B to that, how would you compare the level of electrification in Australian households to American households, and the sentiment and acceptance of the need to electrify amongst both populations?
Absolutely, Australia is leading at a household level on awareness of climate change. So I think everyone's lived experience of the last few years guaranteed that. That said, there's still studies and polls suggest there's 70 million people, or 55 to 70 million people in the US ready to make bold climate action who are very concerned. So, you know, it's not clear to me that in either place we quite have political quorum yet for the uprising we really need. But I think Australia is doing a little bit better. In terms of electrification, you know, Australia is very varied, as is the US. There are some historic places in the southeast of the US that are very electrified because of things that happened all the way back to the Great Depression and FDR. In Australia, there's states like Victoria and ACT that have more natural gas in households, so they're lagging a little bit there. But Australia in general is leading on the electrification, particularly around rooftop solar, but we are lagging very much in having good EV policies. And if we're going to talk about where the money will be saved, the majority of money that's going to be saved in the future is in electrifying our vehicles. So I think it's a little disappointing that Australia hasn't made enough progress on that aspect of electrification yet.
Okay, thanks. So Minister, Victoria's been a leader with our ambitious solar homes program. And, you know, we know for historical reasons that the Victorian homes, you know, do use gas for hot water and for heating. So Saul gave us a presentation this morning that showed, you know, the benefits of, you know, for home electrification, both for climate, but also for, you know, household economics. Great to get an insight on how the Victorian government's thinking about helping homes electrify over the next 20 years, both our homes and obviously our vehicles, which are part of the home economic, you know, ecosystem.
Oh, thank you, and absolutely. Certainly, Victoria does have a long legacy of having gas, especially gas consumption in homes and dual fuel homes. There are more dual fuel homes in Victoria than I think in any other state, which is a challenge in and of itself, of course. And there's history for that. You know, and no less so because of the discovery of gas reserves and offshore in Bass Strait. So there's that legacy there. But I'm absolutely committed to making sure that we do more to assist Victorians to swap, if you like, and move to electrification. So in the November budget of last year, we announced significant funds to effectively swap out about 250,000 old heating systems, most of which will probably be gas, and swap them out for electric heating and cooling systems. That's 250,000 of those in a very, very short period of time. And that's a massive investment, one of the single largest investments really, or swap out programs that any state's actually invested in. So I'm very proud of that. But it also shows that we're absolutely, and I'm absolutely committed to assisting Victorians to make it easier for them to be able to be part of this journey of decarbonising and embracing new technologies, which will be good, of course, not just for our environment in terms of clean air, but also, of course, for purposes of meeting our climate change objectives.
Thanks, Lily. It's also interesting.
There was another.
Keep going. Yes.
The other one was sorry. There was a second part to the question.
Oh, the electric vehicles as part of that.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah. I didn't want to think I wasn't wanting to deal with it. Absolutely. Look, our climate change strategy, our interim emissions targets, which are imminent in terms of announcement, we will have very ambitious targets, but we will also have some clear strategies that will extend to a number of key sectors in the economy, including transport, agriculture, of course, energy, continuing the nation-leading work that we have been on the transformation of the energy sector. So we understand that a lot more needs to be done in Australia. to move towards a concerted effort to decarbonise our transport sector, and we will have a very strong offering when it comes to that. That will be released as part of our climate change strategy and emissions reduction targets, interim targets.
Okay, so if I may ask the cheeky follow-on, obviously Victoria is considering putting a road tax charge on EVs. So is that the kind of a hint that we'll see some incentive on the other side for people to adopt EVs through that strategy?
Yes, cheeky. No, I can't give you an answer to that. You expect me to say that, but I will say to you that I've been working on the development of this strategy and the sector plans together with a number of ministers, in particular portfolio areas, to make sure that we actually provide some very good guidance for the broad economy in terms of the direction that our government wants to take. So we need to understand that climate change interim targets has been a really strong signal to businesses and the whole of the state to understand what the nature of the ambition is of our government and the steps that we will take and also incentivise to get us there. And certainly transport will be an important part of that, of course, because as everyone knows, transport's emissions are increasing globally when they should be going the other way. So there's a lot of work to be done. I never want to let the federal government off the hook here. They've got a lot of levers that subnational jurisdictions don't have, but that's not to say that we are sitting back waiting for the federal government to do good things in this area. We'll do what Victoria's always done, is embrace the future, shape it in the way that we believe is important for Victorians, and have a very, very strong set of programs that will match the level of ambition that we have committed thus far to the journey to decarbonise our economy.
Okay, great. Thank you. A question for both of you, perhaps. Often when Beyond Zero Emissions or others are out there talking about the benefits of electrification and solar on people's homes and those sorts of things, you get into this conversation around the circular economy, and there is an increasing level of concern in the community around what's going to happen with all these solar panels. Are they going to be recycled? So the lifetime of a solar panel is 25 years, so we're still a bit off having to deal with that problem in bulk. But it'd be interesting to get both of your perspectives on how big an issue that actually is, and where the thinking is around that at a governmental level and probably internationally around dealing with it.
I think this is a spectacular question. I think it's worth stepping back and comparing ourselves to fossil fuels for a second. So the average Australian burns around 2,000 kilograms of fossil fuels a year, and they had to be dug up somewhere and processed and transported and shipped. If you gave the same level of amenities to the same Australian and you just electrified their vehicles, you electrified the heating in the home, and you electrified their whole life, you would need, assuming that they're going to last 25 years, you'd need about 50 kilograms of solar for each person each year, about 50 kilograms of wind turbines for each person each year, and about 50 kilograms of batteries each person each year. So even if you don't recycle them, that's 150 kilograms compared to the 2,000 that you're currently using in terms of extraction. But I think so we're already making a much lighter footprint on the world. But then obviously I think it's extremely important to then focus on how do you recycle those things. I'm personally involved in programs in wind that are looking at new materials that don't have the difficulties of being recycled, such as carbon and glass fiber, which are currently a problem. But there's no real reason we shouldn't be able to recycle the majority of the solar components, and there are good programs working on the recycling of the lithium in batteries.
Thanks.
Well, certainly that's a challenge that is on us, and we need to be ready for the challenge of how we manage finite resources, especially from new technologies that come through. And one of the commitments that I've made very clearly as part of our Recycling Victoria policy is the fact that we need to ensure that suppliers, producers of materials actually take up some ownership, if you like, and responsibility for the products that they sell into our economy. I'll be introducing legislation towards the end of this year to establish a new waste authority. It's part of that commitment in terms of lifting up the standards for recycling and setting very clear objectives and ambition. One of the things that we'll be looking at is enabling us to potentially develop our product stewardship programs. Now, obviously, we would like to do that at a national level. That makes things easier all around the economy, but that's not to say that we can't do more of this within our own jurisdictions, but still advocate at a national level. And I think Victorians have become much wiser and attuned to how much waste we actually create. And I think that's shocked people in the last 5 years. We need to make sure that we can enable Victorians to take positive steps that they can take themselves, either in their home or in their workplace, in their community, and of course in businesses, to be able to do what effectively most Victorians want to do, and that is the right thing in terms of their waste, reducing waste, of course, but also being more conscious and responsible for how it is appropriately disposed of. And that's an expectation of governments to lift the game, and that's what we're committing to doing.
Yeah, and no doubt with the upcoming container deposit scheme, you know, Victorians' awareness of waste is only going to grow in the future.
Well, yes, well, absolutely, because and what better way to raise that awareness and to not actually have an incentive attached to it too, to raise funds for community organisations. So definitely, almost half of the waste, or almost half the litter that is produced in Victoria. Almost half of that is made up of beverage containers. So you can start to see already that a CDS scheme, properly designed, making sure that it's as accessible as it needs to be, very accessible. So Victorians, no matter where they live, have the best opportunity to be able to not just collect containers, not litter, but actually return them to collection points. So that's a really important feature that we need to get right, and our aim is to do just that.
Okay, so we've got time for one last question, and it's one that's close to my heart. I mean, Beyond Zero Emissions is doing a lot of work at the moment around the future of manufacturing in Australia, and the ability of cheap renewable power to really power electrified industry through that provision of cheap energy. I mean, Victoria's got a long and proud history as a manufacturing leader in Australia, and you know we're going through. We've got regions in Australia that are such as the Latrobe Valley that are going through this transition to a decarbonised world. So you know, Beyond Zero Emissions is really talking to governments about the concept of renewable energy industrial precincts, where you bring together cheap renewable energy and manufacturing and industry to be able to provide that cheap energy, which makes manufacturing competitive in Australia. How important to Victoria is that idea, is maintaining our manufacturing industry and providing that bridge to a future electrified manufacturing industry running off renewables? And Saul, perhaps you could also chime in around what you're seeing internationally, particularly in the US on that front.
If I could chime in on the domestic economy.
Let's let the Minister respond first, and perhaps you could talk about how that compares to what you're seeing overseas.
Yeah, look, certainly I don't need to be convinced on the added benefits of a localised supply, improvements to the localised supply chain, and in fact we're the only state to be supporting the renewable energy push, especially large-scale renewable energy, with our VRED auction, where we actually required a target for local content. We're the only state that does that, and that's meant that a number of important supply chain manufacturers in Victoria have got really good jobs out of it. Wilson's Transformers have been around many decades in Victoria, and they're doing quite well in terms of been able to provide massive transformers to the large renewable energy projects, and we've helped that along. Of course, there is the wind tower manufacturing, which Keppel Prince in Portland, and certainly if we had other state governments that promoted renewable energy to actually have some local content policies in place, and of course the federal government, we could have a massive game changer here. But there's more that we'll do as a state, absolutely. And for us, it's not just growing new megawatts of power. It's about supporting the entire supply chain, because that's where you get the multiplier effect of jobs creation, skills development. Gail Tierney, Minister for Training, is doing some fantastic things in developing up opportunities for workforce training, skills development to match clean technology, renewable energy. So we very much have got the whole of the ecosystem covered, and we want to make sure that we continue to grow that.
So we've got probably 30 seconds left. Is there anything you want to add?
I'm concerned that Australia is over-investing in the idea of hydrogen. Specifically, I think we're being naive about hydrogen as an export fuel for renewables. The giant opportunity that is real for Australia is up processing of our iron ore and bauxite and using our surplus of renewables to go further up the value chain in our primary industry, and in effect export our renewables in more processed product. That would be a far better way for us to spend our R&D resources and intellectual resources than overinvest in hydrogen. The idea that we'll send hydrogen to Japan and iron ore to Japan to have them make steel is absurd. So I think we really need to think about the economics and the energetics of this globally and regionally as a strong exporter, and then I think that could make us make better exports, better decisions.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. I mean, I've really enjoyed that session. I think you both were, gave great presentations, and it was really fantastic to do this Q&A with both of you. Thanks for joining us today. And I think we'll with Saul's presentation, I think we'll look at a way to share that with the audience.
Apologies that it didn't go smoothly, everyone.
That's okay. It's a great presentation. I've seen it before, so we'll share that out. So thank you to Minister D'Ambrosio. Thank you to Saul Griffith, and looking forward to the next session.